District. This debate is presented by the Newtown Republican Town Committee and it is sponsored by the Associated Refuse, a company owned and built by Pat Caruso, our moderator. I want to welcome some special guests here. State Senator John McKinney, Rob Kane, Sharon Williams, Dan Carter, Jan Giegler, Deborah Lee Hoovey. Let's see, and our special guest is our state chairman, Jerry Labriola. And Jerry is going to speak to you for a couple minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Dennis Bloom. Hello, Newtown. And hello, fellow 5th District Republicans. Welcome to this debate. I see a lot of enthusiasm and a great turnout. And on behalf of the Connecticut Republican Party, I want to commend our 4 candidates for running terrific campaigns. And I have no doubt that we will emerge from this primary with a battle-tested, great nominee, and that the Republican Party 12 days from now will be united in the 5th Congressional District. For any unaffiliated voters in the audience or any that will be listening or will see this by videotape, you have until Monday, 12 noon, to register into the Connecticut Republican Party. We'd love to have you join and participate in helping us choose our nominee on August 14th. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it back to the great Republican Town Chairman here in Newtown, Chairman Dennis Bloom. Thank you, Dennis.
I will leave the rest of the introductions to our moderator. So finally, it is being the owner of Associated Refuse, as being a member of the NFIB, former president of the Newtown Rotary. With that, please make sure to turn off your cell phones and turn it off. I will turn it over to Pat. Thank you and enjoy the debate.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming out to Newtown, for your support of the candidates that are in front of us. Well, of course, my name is Pat, and as Dennis has stated, I just finished term as the president of the Newtown Rotary Club. But I'm here as an individual because our Rotary is a non-political institution, and I really am happy to see such a nice crowd out here. I would like to welcome the candidates seeking the Republican nomination, House of Representatives serving the 5th District. We have businesswoman Mrs. Lisa Foley. We have State Senator Andrew Rohrback. We have Afghanistan veteran Justin Bernier. And we also have businessman Mark Greenberg. I would like to mention this time, I know everybody's excited, and you have every right to be, but try to hold back the applause a little bit so we can move along and move this in a timely fashion. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Our panelists include Newtown's first selectman, Pat Lodra. We have Bob Hall, local attorney, long-term member of the Republican Central State Committee, 25 years. Thank you, Bob. We have Mr. Bob Geckel, the businessman and past chairman of Fairfield Hills Authority. And last but not least, we have Mr. Andy Markowski, State Director of the National Federation of Independent Business. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for their opening statements, after which questions will be put forth by the panelists. There will be a total of 4 questions to each panelist that are going to be put forth to the candidates. And each candidate will have 2 minutes for a response. Each opponent will have a 1-minute rebuttal. I will recognize each candidate when it is their turn. In addition, each candidate will be able to ask one of the other candidates a question, and the response is limited to 2 minutes. We just had a drawing to find out the order in which it will take place, and we divided it up into 4 individual groups. The first group is Senator Andrew Rohrback, Mrs. Lisa Foley, Andrew Bernier, and Mr. Mark Greenberg. The timekeeper, we have a timekeeper. Okay, I ask everybody to look at the timekeeper to keep track of their time. And each will have 15 seconds left. I think she has a 15-second timer. If not, she'll just hold up the end sign. And I believe there's a bell someplace. Am I correct, Dennis? Are we going to have a little audio when his time is up?
No, the bell's not going to work. They'll just hold up the end sign.
Okay, so everybody pay attention. At approximately 8:50 or sooner, each candidate will be given 2.5 minutes for closing statements. Closing statements will be in the same order as the opening statements. We'll adjourn approximately at 9 o'clock, and debate attendees can socialize outside with refreshments. As I said also, please refrain from the holding up signs. We don't want to obstruct anybody's view. And once again, I thank everybody for showing up here, and we'll have a great time tonight. Thank you. The first panelist, the first question is going to be directed at the Senator Andrew Rohrback, and that will be given by Andy Markowski.
Thanks, Pat.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I told you I was new at this. It's almost like a Rotary meeting here. As we stated, the way it's going to take place is, Andrew, you have your opening statement.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, panelists. But most of all, thank you one and all to everyone here in the audience tonight. And thank my fellow competitors. We are all working hard to earn your confidence. On Monday morning, when I was preparing for the debate that we had in Brookfield, I received an email from a woman in Burlington who's putting her heart and soul into building a small business called Renaissance Farm. She emailed me because, well, and this is going to be a great store, by the way. It's on Route 4 in Burlington. She's going to sell locally produced produce, but also ice cream and milk produced at Arethusa Farm in Litchfield, and breads that are baked locally by artisanal bakers. She called me because she had gotten a license from the Department of Consumer Protection, a bakery license, and she thought that meant she was good to go to open this small business, which has been her dream. But she ran into a bureaucratic dead end with the Burlington Bristol Health Department. They wouldn't give her the license they said she needed from them, and she didn't know where to turn. So she called me, and I said, I don't know anyone at the Bristol Burlington Health Department, but I do know the people at the Torrington Area Health District very well. So I called the Torrington Area Health District and said, who should I call at the Bristol Burlington Health District? And they said, call Lynn Abramson. She's the director. So I called Lynn. She was at a conference. I left a message. About a half an hour later, she called me back. I explained the problem. She said she would go visit Linda in Burlington and see if they could solve the problem. At 5 o'clock this evening, as I was putting my finishing touches on tonight's debate remarks, my phone rang, and it was Linda. And she said, Andrew, they just solved my problem. When I had nowhere else to turn, you were there for me. And I want you to put a sign on my lawn in Route 4. I've never put a sign on my lawn in all of my life. But because you were there for me, I want to be there for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to a spirited debate, but public service at the end of the day is about being there for each and every one of you here in the district and in Washington, D.C., and that's what I'm hoping to do for all of you as your member of Congress. Thank you very much.
Our next candidate is Mrs. Lisa Wilson-Foley.
Thank you. I too want to give a big round of thanks to the Newtown RTC, to Pat and all the panelists, and also my opponents here. You know, the 2012 elections are going to turn out to be the most important elections of our lifetime. Our country is at a crossroads. We have two completely different visions for our future. My vision was formed as a young girl growing up in a mill town. I lived in a small apartment with my 4 siblings. It was church subsidized, low-income housing, and we didn't have much. But I had a warm community, wonderful schools, and a stable church that supported us. My mom was the breadwinner and the caretaker. My dad was in and out of hospitals, and he passed when I was young. My siblings and I knew that if we worked hard and got a good education, that anything was possible in America. When I was 29, I started my first business. It was a physical therapy practice. I benefited from something that we seem to be losing: the opportunity for the pursuit of the American dream. I'm in this race because as a mom, I am so fearful for the future of my children, that they will not have the opportunities that I've had. And as a business owner, I am fed up with our federal government and all of their overregulation and overreach. And as a healthcare professional, I know that we need healthcare reform, but not the unaffordable Healthcare Act. I still believe that America is the land of opportunity, and I promise you, if I'm elected to be your Congresswoman, I will make sure that it stays that way. Thank you.
Next candidate is Mr. Justin Bernier. Thank you. I too want to thank the Newtown RTC for putting this together. Dennis and Barbara Bloom, especially. I know this is a lot of work. And Mitch Belinsky, who I understand is running for state rep. God bless Mitch and Godspeed. But I also want to thank my wife, Jenny, my mother, and my daughter, Annabelle, in the back there for coming out tonight. Their second debate this week, so thank you very much for coming out, ladies. I'm running for Congress for the same reason that I joined the military after 9/11. I believe America is in danger, and we got to do something about it. I've talked about this watch on the campaign trail, and I do want to talk about it again tonight because I think it's an important message. When you're in Iraq and you're in Afghanistan, you see the troops, everybody's wearing a watch. Because seconds, minutes, certainly hours can be the difference between life and death, between a mission being successful and one failing. But you come back to the States, you visit Hartford, you visit Washington, D.C., and what you notice is that the politicians are not wearing watches. The politicians really aren't keeping track of the time. And they don't have that same sense of urgency that we do as voters. That's the good news for us. I believe that the voters out there want dramatic change quickly. They want to see things happen. They know that America's in danger, and they want to see real movement on that. They're not getting it from the politicians. And that is our advantage as Republicans this year, because if we can show them that we share that same sense of urgency, if we can show daylight between us and the Democrats, then we're going to be able to win this seat. Elections are about choices, and this primary election is going to be no different. We have choices here. We can go with a conservative Republican, or we can go with a liberal Republican. And I think it matters a whole heck of a lot, because when people get to the polls in November, they're going to want to know that they can take a direct and a very dramatic departure from where Obama has taken us over the past 4 years. So I'm here tonight to ask for your support. I hope that during this debate we can draw out some of those differences, debate them as we're supposed to, and hopefully come to a good solution on August 14th. Thank you very much. Our next candidate is Mr. Mark Greenberg.
Thank you very, very much. I would also like to thank the Blooms for their effort putting in this great show, this great debate. A lot of people in the room, this is very important because you're the people who will make the difference. We need to engage more people in this process. This is a democratic process, the greatest country in the world. We need to have you and other people become part of it. The participation that we have right now is minimal. We have to bring it up, and only then will we truly have a proper debate in this country. What I believe in American exceptionalism. I think this country is the greatest country on the earth. I believe in the principles of liberty and freedom in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. This country is boundless in its energy, boundless in its abilities. We put a man on the moon when we said that we would. We developed information mega millibits of information on a chip the size of my fingernail. Do not discount what freedom could do for its society. Do not discount the great things that we could do again in this country. I know that we're going through tough times. I know that we're borrowing 40% of our budget. I know that we have $16 trillion of debt. I know that the President, the Congress, and the Senate have raised dysfunction to an art form and can't get anything done. Well, what we have to do is we have to change the culture in Washington. We have to stop sending down career politicians whose only goal is to get reelected, who vote based upon the polls, who vote based upon continuing their power, getting their perks, getting their great health care, and caring little for you and me. This is where it has to start. That's why I've signed my own commitment, my own pledge. 8 years, abiding by the laws of Congress, and not accepting a congressional pension. We can do it again in this country. Thank you very much. Freedom in this country. Thank you.
At this point, I will ask Andy Markowski to ask the first question, which is directed to Senator Rohrbeck.
Sure. Senator Rohrbeck, a recent column in the Wall Street Journal by Charles Murray titled, "Why Capitalism Has an Image Problem," examined the virtues of capitalism and the free enterprise system, but pondered why, for example, the term capitalist has become an accusation of late. Why Mitt Romney's resume and success at Bain Capital, for example, should in theory be a major asset for his campaign instead of a liability. And why the country has seemingly gotten so far away from our historic celebration of economic success. How would you, as a member of Congress, be able to change the dialogue on this, both here in the 5th District as well as the national discourse?
Well, thank you, Andrew. I think the way to change the dialogue on this is to remind the American people that the reason this country is the greatest country on the planet is because we have long been committed to the free enterprise system. We've long recognized that there should be limitations on federal power and that we should empower the American people to make the most of this country for themselves and their families. One does not need to look far to see the failures of socialism. Greece, Spain, Portugal, that's what socialism brings to a country. And that's what President Obama is intent on bringing to this country. And that's why it's so very important that all of us work together to elect Mitt Romney president and also to nominate a candidate from the 5th District who can win for the Republican Party, be faithful to those principles, and sing from the rooftops that capitalism is the best economic system that was ever devised and the best hope for our future.
It's turned over to Mrs. Foley.
You know, when I talk to people all over the district, especially legal immigrants, they tell me, Lisa, you know, I'm Republican because I believe in capitalism. They came here to our country because they knew that if they worked hard, they could have that American dream. I know that in my family, I went from very low income to having control over my destiny. That's what's so special and makes America so unique. We can certainly not lose that. I am so hopeful that our president will be Mitt Romney and take us all to a whole nother meaning of capitalism and make sure we don't divide our country by class warfare and how much you make. But we will all be lifted up by a president that will lead us into a future that resounds with free markets and freedom. Thank you.
I believe that the way we're going to change this dialogue and make America, really change the dialogue to a positive one about the economy and about our economic system is if we talk about economic growth as a party. We have to get back to not just talking about austerity. Austerity is important. It's important that we reduce spending. But we have got to talk about economic growth. And we're only growing right now at about 1%. We need to grow this economy at 3.5%. And there's a lot of things that we can do in the Congress to help that along. We can do an all-of-the-above energy policy. We can repeal Obamacare and do real health care reforms. We can do tax reforms that bring down the corporate tax rate, get rid of the death tax. And we can rein in the Fed. This is a huge issue that's been missed too often in this debate and in this race. The Federal Reserve has got a serious toxic asset problem. Right now it's buying up about 50% of our country's debt, and it's creating systemic problems that are making it difficult for the economy to overcome. As a member of Congress, I will vote to audit the Fed, and I will vote to get in there to make sure that we can actually figure out what's actually going back behind the scenes there.
Well, free enterprise is not perfect, but it sure is better than everything else. You know, I've been in the Albanian community. I met this fellow who owns a diner in South Main Street in Torrington. And he's gone to work every single day for 25 years. And I asked him, haven't you taken a day off? And he said to me, why would I take a day off? This is the greatest place to be. I love coming to work at 4 o'clock to make the breakfast. You people in America don't know how great it is here. We come from Albania, we see it. So let's be blessed. We're blessed with the system that we have. Is it perfect? No. But we're trying our best to do whatever we can to make it better.
Our next panelist is Mr. Bob Geckel, and it'll be directed to Lisa Foley.
Lisa, for all the panelists, I'm going to be focusing on social issue questions, so just to give you a heads up on that. In your recent flyer, you indicated you'll vote to defund, dismantle, and deauthorize Obamacare. I think you like alliteration. And you work to replace it with healthcare policies that are cost-conscious and patient-centered. Could you give us specific examples of programs that you would support or recommend if you were a member of Congress?
You know, we have one of the greatest healthcare systems out there. But what's happened over the years, and I've been in healthcare for over 30 years. I have a bachelor's in physical therapy, a master's in public health, and I'm 1 semester shy of my doctorate. So I've studied it as someone in the sandwich generation. I've looked at it from my kids and my parents, and I've also provided care to all types of individuals, from veterans to seniors to kids. And what's happened over the years is there have become more regulations and more paperwork. I'm constantly being told by my physical therapist that they're getting really good at quality paperwork, but they're very concerned about the quality patient care. So there are a lot of things in the system that are broken. We need transparency. We need, as consumers, to know how much healthcare costs. And we need to know who's providing the best quality. And when we have transparency, we will then choose wisely as consumers. And the people that are not providing good care will go away. And the best providers will survive. And that is market-driven forces in a nutshell. So I don't want our government in our healthcare system. I don't want our government putting a panel up there deciding who gets what. I want to make sure that our physicians are trained in family dynamics and trained in talking with patients about the best quality of care for them. Our government should not be in that business. Transparency, we want outcomes, our research. It takes 17 years now to go from outcome studies to actually implementation of that research. That's way too long. We'd save a lot of money if we brought that down to 5 years. So those are just a few things, Bob.
There's no doubt that we have got to repeal Obamacare and replace it with common sense solutions that are going to make sense, bring down costs. Now, Medicare, of course, is a huge target of Obamacare. It rips $500 billion out of it, and that needs to be stopped. But Obamacare is going to be probably the single largest issue in this race in November. And we've got to make sure that the candidate that we nominate has been against Obamacare since day one and is able to speak to those issues in a way that makes sense. One of my competitors Lisa, you praised Obamacare in 2010, and God bless you, you've come around 180 degrees. But Donovan's going to be able to take advantage of that. Andrew, in other ways, you've supported tenets of Obamacare, be it a public health care exchange, be it bringing back tort reform. There's other ways that I think that you have not been strong enough in your positions against Obamacare early on when you had the chance to. And so it's very important, I believe, that we have a Republican that has been on the record all the way against the tenets of Obamacare, whether it's a public health exchange or whether it is a federal mandate, which you praised in the Torrington debate.
Mark?
From the beginning, I was against Obamacare, called for its repeal. So let's repeal it first. Thank you very much, but let me get this point out. Secondly, let's be sure that we don't kill the body in the process of curing the cancer. We have the best medical delivery system in the world. People come here for the medical delivery system. Do we have issues of people not covered by insurance? Yes, we do. Maybe 5 to 6% of those people who are uncovered who don't want to be covered. Some people don't want to be covered. So let's be careful about what we do. We should have tort reform. We should allow people to purchase their insurance from other companies. Insurance companies need to be able to sell the products across state lines. We have to be able to offer in all states catastrophic insurance, which is really what the meaning of insurance with high deductibles. That will bring down the cost as well. We also have to improve the doctor-patient relationship so that there's a greater relationship between the person paying for the services and the person receiving a fee for those purchases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Let me first disagree with Ms. Lisa Wilson-Foley when she says government shouldn't be in the healthcare business. To the extent that that statement suggests that Medicare should be dismantled and seniors should be left without a program that they have paid into and are entitled to rely on, I strongly disagree. And to the extent what I heard was that government should not be in the healthcare business. I thought that was an ironic statement coming from an individual whose family is paid a lot of government money to fund the business that they're in. That's the structure that we have. Medicaid and Medicare fund a great deal of our health business. And I want to respectfully disagree with Mr. Bernier as well, because in March of 2010, I wrote to Attorney General Richard Blumenthal and asked him to join in the suit to declare Obamacare unconstitutional. The letter is in my hand. From the day it was passed, I knew this was a train wreck for the American people and the American economy. The solution, Bob, to answer your question, in my view, rests not with the federal government, but rather with each of the 50 states. I'm a believer in federalism. We should entrust each of the 50 states with coming up to a solution to a real public policy problem. We can learn from those that succeed, and we can also learn from those which fail. But that, I think, is a much better alternative than Obamacare.
That will be directed to Mark Greenberg. First question with Mark Greenberg.
Okay. I thought I was asking Justin Bernier my first question, if the columns are being kept in order. So I'm going to assume they are, and I'm also going to say that I'm the questioner who is supposed to ask questions having a political dimension. And the questions I'm asking are questions which I would ask these candidates individually if we were talking in a social setting. So I hope that you in the audience will find these questions as relevant as I do. My first question, as I say, Pat, I think if I'm in the right column, my first question is directed to Justin. And I apologize for it being a softball question. For you and Mark Greenberg, this is the second time around for the 5th Congressional District. Please tell us what you see that is different from 2 years ago, which gives you hope that you can win the primary.
Well, everyone up here has run more than once. So there's nothing unique about that with our situations. But this year, more than even last year, I believe the American people are hungry for real change, and they're hungry for conservative leadership. And they know that we don't have a lot of time to fix the problems that are facing this country. it's really coming to a head. And I believe there's a huge groundswell out there to elect conservative candidates, not just in the rest of the country, but in Connecticut too. Why shouldn't we be able to elect a conservative? Wisconsin did with Scott Walker. We've got Governor Christie down in New Jersey, Marco Rubio in Florida. These are not easy states for Republicans. But we have to believe in ourselves as a party in this state, or we're not going to be able to get elected to anything. Right now there's a Democratic monopoly in Connecticut. They've got control of every congressional, senatorial seat, every constitutional office. And I believe if we show daylight between us and the Democrats, if we stand by our Republican principles, then we will get elected. We will be able to turn this state Republican again. But if we are afraid to stand by those principles, those core principles that make this party and make this country, then we will continue to lose elections. And so I think the big difference between last cycle, Bob, and this cycle is the sense of urgency is even higher. And we've learned from last election that if we can show more daylight between us and the Democrats, I think we can overcome some of the obstacles in the state.
Yes, Bob, it's been 3 years, and I must admit that this is getting somewhat tiring, and I can't wait till the 14th. I'm a happier version than I was 2 years ago. One of the things that people would say to me 2 years ago is, Mark, you're so angry. Come on, Mark, you gotta lighten up a little bit. So I've become a little happier, I've become a little more, better versed at the issues. One reason why I know that I'll do better this time than last time, and I didn't do too bad last time, is that I have so many wonderful people out here that you don't even give me time to make my answers, okay? So I know that I have the grassroots behind me. We've made so many calls, over 36,000 calls at this point in time, and the feedback is just wonderful. From the point of view of being competitive in the primary and the general election, we do have the funding capabilities to go toe-to-toe with whoever they have. So I feel very, very confident. I feel that the district this time wants a clear conservative choice to bring this flag home to Connecticut in the 5th District.
Justin is right when he says that everyone up here has run for office before. I'm the only candidate who's ever won an election in this state. And the difference this year is that it's an open seat. And I'm running for Congress because I'm confident that the Republicans can pick up this seat if we run the right candidate. And Justin, you should have your eyes examined, because if you've been looking at what's going on in Hartford, there's a whole lot of daylight between me and Governor Malloy. Governor Malloy would be the first to tell you that. Because when I stood up to him on the busway from New Britain to Hartford, when I stood up to him when he tried to give the Communist Party $300,000, and when I've stood up to him and all the Democrats in the legislature, when they've passed the biggest tax increase ever, there could not be more daylight between us. We have a golden opportunity here to win this seat. Let's not blow it.
The reason my candidacy is resonating so greatly is because I come from the real world. I've raised my kids. I've built my businesses. I am not a career politician. Everyone is tired of sending people to Washington that will become, or already are, career politicians. We know that they start voting because they're mad at the person that they didn't vote with last time, or they're hanging on to the lobbyist money. And the average Joe out there wants someone that's going to listen. Career politicians have stopped listening. You know, Andrew's been in the State House for 18 years. He's voted for budgets that increase spending. He's voted to increase 45% increase on the gas tax. He's voted a tax increase 20% on small businesses. I've been a small business for well over 20 years. And you know, the regulations that our state has put on our back, never mind our federal government. I don't know where Andrew was while they were making all those regulations. We need an environment for creative minds to start businesses. That's what we need in Washington. Thank you.
Selecting Pat Lodra, and that, I believe, according to the elderly individual over there, that he will be directed to Mark Greenberg.
As
As a questioner, I've been invited to ask you about issues and positions seen as relevant from my position as Newtown's CEO. My questions then will have a flavor of financial policy as well as social policy. So, Mr. Greenberg, this is for you. The strengthening of gun control laws has stalled year over year in Congress. Recent events in Colorado have again drawn our attention to that issue. What is your stance in general on the need for gun control? What do you see as the proper role of the federal government in creating those changes? And please be as specific as possible.
Great question. Of course, the tragedy in Colorado is unbelievable, and I can't imagine being there or having children who are in that room. But I'm a Second Amendment guy, and I believe that it's I'm a very strong Second Amendment guy, and I believe in the Constitution completely and thoroughly. And I believe what we should have, perhaps, is education on handling of the guns and other programs. But I wouldn't change the laws. And I think, it's in my experience at least, when the federal government gets involved with changing laws and building these long laws of 2,700 pages in the case of Obamacare and 2,300 pages in the case of Dodd-Frank, something tends to go wrong. So I tend to leave most of the Constitution and look at everything within the prism of the Constitution.
Next, Andrew.
I also am a strong proponent of the Second Amendment because I do believe it's the amendment which enables this country to be free in the knowledge that our government will never become so tyrannical that we have no ability to reclaim it. Remember that this country was born because of the tyranny of the British, who wouldn't give us an opportunity to have a say in how we were governed. So my belief is the best solution to gun violence, which is a problem in our society, is to enforce strictly the laws that are on the books, not to pass more laws, because my experience in Harvard has taught me that we're not enforcing what's on the books, and the people who are committing these crimes do so in violation of the laws that we do pass. So we need to commit more resources to enforcement and more resources to creating a healthy society, because at the root of all this is a healthy society.
Well, the Colorado tragedy was obviously very horrific, and my husband and I had a daughter 8 miles from that movie theater, so it hit home with us. But you know, I also am a major supporter of our Constitution, our Second Amendment, and the last thing we want to do is literally jump the gun. We cannot take incidents that occur and start changing policy based on those incidents. That problem, that horrific accident, or not accident, that horrific happening was not about guns or weapons. It was about mental illness and evil. And those two things, when they come together, no matter what you put in your hands, whether it's a lighter fluid or knives, bombs, you will create havoc. So the gun control issue should not even be discussed related to that incident. That being said, I believe that states should have more decision-making in terms of gun control, and every state is different. Wyoming and Connecticut look completely unalike. Thank you.
Oh, so Justin, I'm sorry.
I've been called Mark and Andrew tonight. Pretty soon. You know, I do not believe that more gun control is the answer here. We need to enforce the laws that we have. We've got plenty of laws in the books. And I get angry when I see the federal government not enforcing the laws it's supposed to, but then going off on a different program called Fast and Furious, which actually created more gun violence instead of preventing it. We need to have serious continued hearings into this until we get to the bottom of it. But the point I'm trying to make here is we don't need more laws. We need them to be properly enforced.
We're going through our second rotation, and our next panelist is Andy Murkowski, and that's going to be directed to Andrew Warbeck.
Great.
I think we're maintaining the same rotation.
back to small business topic. I represent thousands of small business owners here in Connecticut, and I hear from them every day about what they think their complaints are. So this question attempts to get at what you as candidates think are top concerns of small business owners. Everyone's probably aware of the controversial comments that President Obama made recently. Most small business owners feel that they did not become successful because of help from the government. In fact, many small business owners feel that they've become successful, had to work hard and grow their businesses, in many instances, in spite of the government. It's no secret. It's no secret today that small business owners face numerous obstacles, whether those are obstacles that are found in the marketplace, in the economy as a whole, or those that are created by the government. So what do you view as the single biggest competitor for small businesses today, particularly those businesses here in the 5th District? And what specifically would you propose to help those small businesses overcome such an impediment?
And that is directed to Andrews. See, I was running in the same sequence that we did. That's the way I was told it was going to be. So Lisa, we'll move it over to you, Lisa, okay? So we'll just flip them over.
Okay, well, having been in the small business world for over 20 years, government is smothering small businesses, entrepreneurs, risk takers, and you know, only 50% of taxes, 50% of the small companies are able to survive the death tax. So that is one of the taxes that we certainly need to axe. We want our generational businesses to continue. 70% of small businesses don't make it to the 3rd generation. Government continues to put more onerous regulations. And what's really disheartening is that we have our city government, we have our state government and regulations, and then we have our federal regulations on top of all of those. And there is no conduit, no one talking about how those 3 regulatory bodies work together to make it easy for entrepreneurs to survive. We want to become not the land of steady habits. We want to become the land of opportunity and energy and creativity. We need to make sure that our schools can keep some of the smartest and brightest of the people that are in our wonderful colleges here in Connecticut. But they're leaving our state. They're leaving our state for better environments where the government isn't walking in picket lines, where the government isn't saying, yes, we're open for business, but only certain types of businesses. So there are so many things that we can do, and I want to be the ambassador for small business in Washington. I want to be their voice, and the people that want to create jobs, I want to make sure that they have the financing. You know, people with wealth are putting it out there and giving angel financing for startups. But our banking system is in so much turmoil because of the Dodd-Frank regulations. We have 167 pages of regulations. Small businesses they spend $1.7 trillion just trying to comply with them.
Almost every small businessman and woman in the state is that Connecticut's government is killing them. When I grew up in this state, we had a powerful economy, there was prosperity. 20 years later, we are last in the country in job creation. And we don't need to get into all the other terrible indicators, but we've got the highest energy costs, we've got the highest taxes, and we have the worst business environment, and all these things have been documented. The voters in November are going to be looking for somebody who's not attached to that legacy. And sadly, the Connecticut legislature has been part of that problem over the last 18 years. Now, I understand there's Republicans there that believe that they've been doing things extremely different from the Democrats, but that's only because they don't see how close together they really are. If we want to capture the imagination of voters in November and do a real departure from the Democrats, to a real departure from the liberal policies and the crony capitalist policies like the Jackson Labs project and other projects that we've had where we've just been giving away money to businesses, then we need to endorse, or rather nominate, a conservative who's going to show that daylight between us and the Democrats.
Well, I have a unique perspective on this with small businesses because I own a number of properties in Connecticut, and these small businesses, which are my tenants, are constantly crying on my shoulder and telling me how bad business is, how high the cost of electricity is, highest in the continent of the United States, how high the cost of doing business in Connecticut is. In Connecticut, we ask people to pay $250 for the mere privilege of being in the state and opening up a door. So it's dismal. I hear it every day, and I must admit that I'm a softie when it comes to a lot of tenants who simply can't pay the rent because they can't afford to pay the rent because the economy here is so strangling. Everybody knows this is the highest tax state in the union, and from my perspective, it started going downhill in 1991 when we had the temporary income tax.
First, I want to set the record straight, and that is, well, if Ms. Lisa Wilson-Foley had a better understanding of civics, she would know that the Connecticut legislature is a part-time citizen legislature. In all of the years I've been serving, I have held down a full-time job in my family's business. I'm the fourth generation of my family. We've made it 4 generations by working hard, making payroll, paying taxes, and what I do all day long is give advice to small businesses that are trying to grow, trying to make a go of it here in Connecticut. To answer Andrew's question, in my view, the single biggest thing Congress can do to boost small business prospects is to repeal Obamacare. Ernst & Young has concluded that Obamacare will cost this nation 0.5% of all jobs we now have. That translates into 700,000 jobs in this country. If we want to build confidence in small business, we ought to start by repealing something which is the biggest impediment to job creation on the map today.
We were assigned. Bob Geckel, you're next, and I believe that's going to be directed to Justin. Am I correct?
Justin, 1 week ago, there was an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal entitled, interestingly enough, "You Don't Owe That." The piece happened to be discussing the Obama proposal to make it easier for individuals to default on student loans. Now, to put it in perspective, the total student loan Kitty right now is over $1 trillion. There's estimates that it could be as high as 20% default rates on the student loan program. Specifically, this proposal was to allow students to discharge their obligation through bankruptcy. I'd like to have your opinion on the program overall and specifically on that proposal.
Well, I don't believe that we ought to be putting these issues into bankruptcy court, but I also believe that a lot of these students have been set up to take on a lot of debt because the government has mismanaged that program and has gotten so deep into it where they are just giving money away by the hundreds of thousands. So when someone gets out of school, now they owe $200,000 and $300,000 in school bills, but the problem is there's no jobs. So there's no way that they can pay it back. The best way that we can handle this problem is by looking at that program, but also growing the economy. Because if someone gets out of college and they got to wait 2 years to get a job, they're never going to be able to get those student loans paid. But if they come out and they're able to find a good paying job, that's not going to be a problem. So it's a huge economic growth issue. I think it's something Republicans need to take seriously. We should not cede this issue to the Democrats. I believe I'm 36 years old and I think I can communicate to a lot of the students and I'll be able to bring over a lot of those younger voters come November and get a demographic that as Republicans we've struggled with in the past.
I think above all, we're a country of laws and a country of contracts, and we have to abide by those. If those are treated casually, then nobody will follow any law. So we have to be a country of laws and contracts. What we should do with regard to these loans is reduce the interest rates appropriately and extend the date of repayment out appropriately. But we must let these people know that they signed the contract, they signed a note, they owe the money back. We can make it easier for them to pay back, but they owe the money.
I think we would be sending a very dangerous message to young people in this country if we say to them, you can look to the government to help finance your education, but if at the end of the program you decide you don't feel like paying the government back, you can have that debt discharged in bankruptcy. People are racking up large debts at the taxpayer's expense, and given the cost of education, it's a necessary thing for us to do. I think it's important for government to support people as they pursue higher education. But I also think it's important when people take on that responsibility that they be held to it, and that the rest of us not be looked to pick up the pieces if they decide they don't want to follow through with the deal.
This generation, which is graduating from college with all these loans, it is a unique generation. They have watched as our federal government has added to our debt. We have $16 trillion of debt that we're putting on their backs, and we're not paying them down. We need to show that we have a balanced budget amendment, that we have a plan to pay our debts down. Now certainly, education is crucial to bringing the people from one level to the next level. I mean, it's the one thing that got me out of poverty. But we cannot guarantee kids that we're going to let them default from loans that they've taken. We cannot let people that have bought homes way above their ability to pay the loans down. That would set our country in a very downward spiral. I am fearful this shoe has not dropped. There will be banks that have major consequences because of the student debt. But I'm hopeful that if we can set the tone in Washington and give some certainty and show how we're going to pay our debts off, then our students will follow.
Our next panelist is Bob Hall, and I believe that will be directed to Mark.
I agree. Thank you. I knew you'd see it my way eventually. Mark, the four Republicans running in the primary, it's my perception that you have positioned yourself as the most conservative candidate. I also believe that many, if not most, of the registered Republicans in northwestern Connecticut are liberal. Please comment on those points and tell us why you believe your political philosophy will garner the most votes in the primary and in the general election. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I do call myself the clear conservative choice. I have certain beliefs and I have certain principles. Now, if you were to go to my website now, you'd see a lot of repetition from 3 years ago. That's because my website hasn't changed. So my positions generally 3 years ago are my positions now. To me, it's as much a process as a result. I'm a product of the American dream, and I want to make sure that my children have the capability of pursuing that American dream as I did. If I win, fine. If I lose, I'll be able to look in the mirror and say that I've done it my way, done it honestly, and done it based upon my principles. I'm not going to run the race based upon votes. I'm going to run the race based upon my principles. If the folks in the 5th District agree with those principles and that honesty, then I'll get the nomination, hopefully elected. If they don't, I go back to my 4 wonderful children.
I have all the respect in the world for Bob Hall, who can't. But I think his question is premised on a false premise. Because I represent the people of Northwest Connecticut, and they are far from liberal. You can listen to my answering machine any day of the week, Bob. I'll happily forward the messages along to you. We shouldn't mistake what Mark Greenberg brands as conservatism as being the only definition of conservatism. My definition of conservatism is a libertarian definition of conservatism. It's a conservatism that doesn't invite government into our private lives, that doesn't invite government to be looking over our shoulder in our private decision-making. I think the real conservative candidate is me, who believes that less government intervention in every aspect of our lives is desirable. Not government trying to regulate our private conduct, not government trying to inject itself into every nook and cranny of our lives. So I think the libertarian conservative is more the stripe that you'll find in Northwest Connecticut, and so I don't think the question is well phrased. Respectfully.
When I was 18, I chose the field of physical therapy. What I loved about that field is that I taught people how to be as independent as possible. What I love about the Republican Party, it's all about a hand up, not a hand out. And so I believe my conservative values go back to when I was 18. I want people to be independent physically, mentally, financially, socially, and when people are, they are much happier than when they are reliant upon a government that doesn't know how to show outcomes on programs that they're providing. You know, we cannot be a Tempur-Pedic mattress. I want to have a government that's like a trampoline, that pushes someone back out into the real world and gives them the skills and tools to get that job, to be able to make it in this world. That's conservative values, and I believe that I'm the best one to represent this 5th District area in Washington, taking those core values of giving a helping hand and helping the people that need it most.
Bob, if I didn't know you, I'd think that was a question from the liberal Hartford Current. But, you know, look, Northwestern Connecticut's not liberal. Andrew, in fact, is probably the most liberal guy I know up there. And Andrew, for you to, I mean, I love you, but for you to call yourself a conservative, it's just not true. And, you know, I recently got a mailer from you, and by the way, you ought to save the postage, because I already know who I'm voting for on August 14th. But talking about how conservative you are, and, you know, I know you mean well, but when you vote for a cap and trade bill and you're not willing to allow it to be repealed even after we find out that it doesn't work, a cap and trade tax, that's not conservative. When you introduce 3 sales tax increases on the people of Connecticut, you do that on your own accord, that is not conservative. When you back earmarks and things like Jackson Labs, it isn't conservative. And there's a lot of things out there, Andrew, when you say that you're going to support, when you think Congress ought to impose a health care mandate on the people of this state, it's not conservative. When you vote to bring back tort reform, it's not conservative. So we got to be honest with the record here. You have a liberal record. You ought to just be a man about it, stand up and defend it and explain it to the people in the race, and maybe they'll support you.
And I believe that's going to be directed to Justin. Am I correct?
No, I think it's going to be directed to Mr. Rohrbach.
Andrew, okay. It's interesting how the sequence is on this thing.
We
Go ahead.
have our own pattern over here.
I think so.
So we will start this.
Andrew.
The Bush tax cuts continue to provoke controversy and divisiveness in Congress and across the nation. Please elaborate on your position regarding these tax cuts for the so-called wealthy. Are you for or against, and why? And try to tie your answer as carefully as you can to economic growth and development for this nation.
Thank you very much. First, for those of you who missed the debate in Brookfield on Monday, in that debate, I directed the attention of the public and the press to a mailing that Justin Bernier had sent out after he lost the convention, in which he made the representation that I supported, the outrageous representation, that I supported giving voting rights for illegal aliens. I said at that time, and now I've just heard Justin say that I supported money for Jackson Labs, an outright fabrication. What I said then, and what I say now, is this office is too important to allow people to promulgate outright lies. If he lies to us as a candidate, how can we ever trust him to tell us the truth if he's our congressman? Now, to answer Pat's question, I think now would be a particularly bad time to let the Bush tax cuts expire. And the reason for that is because I've met with many small business owners and manufacturers in the 5th District who say their sub-S corporations, their LLCs, they fall into that category of so-called wealthy. And the money that they make can either be used to expand in new plants and equipment so they can hire new people and provide more jobs, or it can go into the government. And I think what we need now is a growing economy. The way for us to raise more revenue is to have more taxpayers making more money, not to take more money from the people that are our best hope to create new jobs.
We have a horrible economy, everyone knows it. Economists all over the country are saying this is no time to increase taxes on anyone. We definitely need to extend the Bush tax cuts for all Americans, especially our seniors. You know, they are dependent on their dividends, and their dividends are only taxed at 15%. If we take that if we don't extend the tax cuts, these seniors will be put at very dear consequences, and they're fearful about that. You know, if we don't extend the Bush tax cuts, $4,000 is what is going to be placed on families right here in the 5th District. That's what those tax extensions are saving these families. This is not the right time to put taxes on anyone. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. We need to reduce the size of our government, get it way too big for its britches, and start making the hard decisions that we need to make to reduce our spending.
I believe we should raise taxes. It's the last thing we should do in a recession. I believe we ought to leave them at that level. Let's bring it down, especially bring down the business tax. There's no doubt about that. You know, Andrew, you and I, we're going to disagree on a lot of things in this race, and there's always going to be room for us to talk about these things. But, you know, when you introduce a bill to allow non-citizens the right to vote, you got to really think about the implications of that. And you have to really give a lot of thought to the precedent that you're setting and what that's going to mean when people's green cards run out and they're still on the voting rolls. And I believe it's a terrible, especially in the state of Connecticut, we have such voter fraud right now. For you to introduce those bills, I think is very irresponsible. So let's at least agree on the fact that you introduce bills to allow non-citizens to be able to vote in local elections. I believe that only U.S. citizens should be allowed to vote.
I would extend the Bush tax cuts for 1 year. I would also extend the tax holiday for 1 year. What we need to have is stability, security, and predictability now in our tax policy. And what we would ask, or what I would ask, is that the now dysfunctional Congress would somehow become functional over that next year and create a new tax code. Absolutely rip up the 30,000 pages of garbage we have now. And move to a flatter tax with less exemption, less loopholes. That way, more people will have skin in the game, more people will pay into the system, and actually will have greater growth, and we'll have greater tax revenues, even though we have lower marginal rates. It worked for JFK and it worked for Reagan.
Andy Mikowski, and I believe that's directed to Justin.
Justin, I want to turn to the question of energy policy for a minute. Energy policy is a hot topic amongst small business owners, and as well as the debate in Congress right now. Small businesses are huge consumers of energy and natural resources. It's a huge cost driver, whether it's running the lights, computers, equipment at their business, whether it's diesel or gasoline that's needed to run fleet vehicles or trucks, whether it's oil or natural gas to heat a facility. That being said, here in Connecticut, unfortunately, we're literally and figuratively at the end of the pipeline, so to speak. What I'd like to hear from you and the rest of the panelists are, what type of national energy policies do you support or oppose at a national level, and how do you see that benefiting small businesses here in the 5th District?
Well, it's such a great question, because this ought to be the highest manufacturing state in the entire country, high-end manufacturing state. And they're not building here, and they're not growing here, in large part because of the high energy costs. And when you go and talk to the manufacturers, that is one of the first things out of their mouths when you ask them, how come you're having a hard time and not able to grow your business? We have in Connecticut the highest electricity costs in the continental United States. Only Hawaii is higher. And there's a lot of things you want to be number 2 to Hawaii. Beaches being one of those things, but it's not electricity costs. One of the reasons that we're going to continue to have high electricity costs in this state is because of overregulation and a cap-and-trade system called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative that this state got itself into some years ago. Now, there's other states that have wised up and they realize it's not a good deal. A higher energy tax is not going to benefit their manufacturers and their households. And our households are really hurting with energy costs. So Governor Christie down in New Jersey pulled out of that bill. I was very disappointed to see when Senator Andrew Rohrbeck refused to vote for a bill or support a bill that would have got us out of that program. You voted for the program in the first place, and people make a mistake, it's okay. But you had a chance to pull out of that system, and you refused to. I will not support any energy taxes additional on the United States. We don't need them. What we do need is an all-of-the-above energy policy that's going to really hit all of the wickets there. Let's use our natural gas, let's use our nuclear, let's use our clean coal. Let's do everything we can to do all of the above. We have a $500 to $700 billion trade deficit on energy. We need to eliminate that. America can become energy independent, but we're not going to do it with cap and trade. And so it's very important that whoever we send down to Congress is 100% opposed to cap and trade, and that whoever we put in as our nominee in November, take on the Democrats, can use this issue against Chris Donovan and the Democrats and say, why did you support an energy tax on the American people and the people of Connecticut when they could least afford it? We won't be able to do that with Andrew. I will be able to stand up in that situation and say, Mr. Donovan, you were wrong to support cap and trade, and you're wrong again.
This is a very, very simple answer. You know, Carter started the Department of Energy in 1978 with the theory that we'd be energy independent in 25 years. That didn't work out too well, I guess. We have to increase the supply of the energy sources in order to reduce the cost. We have to drill in Andor. We have to drill off the coast of Florida. We have to improve our We have to reduce the depreciation schedule for infrastructure, whether it's national gas or the drilling of wells, to 5 years or less from 33 years. That will get private investment into the exploration of energy and increasing our supply. Now this is a win-win-win situation. We'll become energy independent and we'll reduce the cost of these fuels and these energy sources. Plus, we'll be less dependent on the Middle East, which will save American blood in the Middle East defending those sources of energy. This is a win-win-win. We have to drill. We have the Bakken Formation, which has the greatest supply of energy sources in the world, almost. So let's start now, not tomorrow.
We do need an energy policy, and we haven't had one in a long time. We need to be less reliant on foreign oil, obviously. We're dependent on countries that hate us. We have a lot of energy right here in our country. And those utilizing, whether we're digging or putting oil, digging for oil out in offshore wells, we need to have an energy policy where we can put people back to work here. Capital markets are the places that we should be playing with, not a government. There's a company right here in Sandy Hook, and Curtis Packaging, I don't know if any of you know it, but he came up with his own solution. So he uses wind energy. And not only has he increased the amount of business that he's doing, because his customers really like the concept that he's using wind, he's actually reduced his cost. So if we use market forces and business principles, we can expand all of the energy, whether it's wind or solar or our fuel cells. We've got it right here in this country, and I want to make sure that our energy policy reflects that.
I believe Bob.
Pat, I'm not sure I had a crack at that one yet.
Oh, sorry, I ran right over you. I apologize for that.
No worries. First, let me just emphatically say that the Keystone Pipeline is something that will do a great deal for this country's energy security. It's something that we should do. And to answer your question specifically, Andrew, as you know, the proceeds from the Clean Energy Fund, when Connecticut auctions off its carbon emissions, the proceeds are used to help small business develop energy efficiency technology so they can be more competitive. If Justin really wanted to support small business, and I'll take you on a tour introducing you to hundreds of small businesses in Connecticut that have benefited directly from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which 10 Northeast states, that bill passed the Senate almost unanimously, because we recognize here in Connecticut that first of all, the public health is jeopardized by the emissions that are coming into our state. And so we wanted to reduce those emissions and simultaneously help small business and consumers retrofit their homes and their businesses to use less energy, save money, and be competitive. So I'll never apologize for helping small businesses save energy. It's good for our national security, it's good for our small businesses, and it's sound public policy.
I think I'm in order now. And I believe this is directed to Mark.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mark, there's a call in the country for comprehensive reform of our immigration policies. I'd like to have you comment on some of the issues, including undocumented workers, the DREAM Act, the recent Obama executive order, which bypassed Congress's work on the DREAM Act, and then specifically, what national policies would you want to see implemented and would you support relative to immigration?
Great question. And my family, of course, is a family of immigrants. My grandfather emigrated from Russia in 1902, and generations before that from Eastern Europe. We are a country of immigrants, and our greatness is partially due to the fact that we're a melting pot of these societies. At the time that they came in, until fairly recently, it was a more streamlined process to get into this country. Part of the problem with the fact that we have illegal immigrants is that the legal immigration capability is becoming so long. It takes too long to become a legal immigrant. So we have to speed up the process for people to come to this great, great country and participate. I think that we have to frown upon illegal immigrants because they're illegal. As I said before, we are a country of laws. We have to abide by the laws, notwithstanding the fact that our president tends to take the law in his own hands. So we have to encourage legal immigration, streamline that process, discourage illegal immigration, and frown upon it.
Last year, the Connecticut legislature had a bill which would have given in-state tuition to young people who are in this country in violation of the law. And I voted against that bill, not because the young people are culpable. They're not. They were brought here by their parents when they were 2 or 3 years old. But I voted against the bill because to give a spot at UConn to someone who's here unlawfully at the expense of a student who was raised by parents who are here legally, paying their taxes, playing by the rules, didn't seem fair. This country is in need of a comprehensive immigration policy. And let me just briefly clarify the spurious allegations that are coming from my neighbor. I had a science teacher in high school who's been in this country for 40 years with a green card. He's from Great Britain. He's owned a home, paid his taxes, sent his kids to the local schools. He said, Andrew, you're from Goshen. If you had $1,000 worth of property in my town, you could vote in the school budget. I own a house, I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars in property taxes. I'm here legally, I want to be able to vote in the school budget. There's a lot of other states that extend that opportunity, never to vote in an election, never to vote for a first selectman or a board of finance, but to vote in the school budget if you own a home, pay taxes, you've got kids in the school. I thought we want people more involved in our education system, not less.
I have 3 teenage daughters, and they're all driving. And the rules regarding driving are all very complex nowadays. And I'm constantly teaching them what's legal and what's not legal. Even if I don't agree with those laws, I have to teach them what they are. When we have illegal immigrants, and we do not treat them like illegal immigrants, it's very difficult as a parent to teach your kids what legal and illegal means. President Obama recently put up an executive order. This was a political move. He wanted to gain the Hispanic vote. You know, he had 2 years where he had total control of our federal government. He wasn't bringing up immigration reform at that time. It was a political move, it's short term. I feel badly for the kids that are affected by that because they're still uncertain about their futures. So we do need immigration reform, but first, we've got to support our borders. We've got to secure our borders, make sure that we are secure on a safety measure, but also economic measure. I don't want our government to do many things, but the few things I want them to do, I want them to do well.
We need to secure our borders and enforce immigration laws first, and really that's the answer to the immigration problem. And I understand, Andrew, yes, you're correct. We do not have an illegal immigration problem in Goshen. But when you're in the state legislature, you're writing bills for the entire state, and there are other municipalities in this state that do have a big problem. And they don't want to see rules like this laxed up so that illegal immigrants or non-citizens or anyone could eventually vote as a U.S. citizen when they're not. And I understand that's not your intention, Andrew, but you have to realize what unintended consequences come from legislation that happens in Hartford in the bubble there. You know, on the cap and trade issue, you've got it all wrong. What you're doing through that cap and trade system is picking winners and losers. And what you're doing is pushing businesses out of the state, where they're going to go either overseas or outside of the area, and then they'll have no standards for their emissions, and they'll pollute even more. Cap and trade does not make the air any cleaner. All it does is trade the right to emit. So it's a complete fallacy that you're saying there. You ought to be honest with people on what it really is. It's an energy tax so that politicians in Hartford have more money to play with to pick winners and losers in the business world. And to me, that is a definition of crony capitalism.
If I'm not mistaken, Bob?
No, that's right. Thank you.
No, where are you directing it? Because I have a feeling you're going to ask me to fork over a lot of money on this
Yes,
meeting.
the Rotary Club, yes, sir. Now this, I'm going to preface this, I didn't intend to, but I realized that I really need to explain that this is a purely political question. It is not intended to be anything outside of the political area. It's not going to relate to small business. And Andrew, since I'm asking him the question, may very well criticize my assumptions, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is that both Lisa Wilson-Foley and Mark Greenberg can self-fund their candidacies. Please tell us how much you have raised as of today, not the last reporting cycle, and how much of that is self-funded. And how much money do you expect to have left over after the primary? Secondly, how much money do you believe it will take to win the 5th district in the general election? And what source of funding will you have to raise that kind of money? As I say, that's a purely political question. And I want the same comments from the other candidates as well. Thank you.
And it's a multi-pronged question, Bob. I hope I can remember all of the pieces to it. But let me just first start with a blanket statement about what a sad day it will be for this country if only independently wealthy people are permitted to seek public office. It's a very sad statement on our democracy. Now, I will say, having said that the reality is very few candidates who fund their own campaigns end up winning elections. There's one thing in this country that can't be bought, and that's an election. Elections have to be earned, and they have to be earned by earning the confidence of the voters. Bob, to your point, I think as of July 25th, I've raised $571,000 since October 20th. I was the last candidate to get into this race, and And since I've gotten into this race, I've consistently outraised all three of my opponents. In fact, in the last reporting period, I raised more than all three of my opponents combined. I have a great deal of confidence, and I'm going to spend every penny I have to win the primary. Let me to answer that part of the question. And I know that after the primary, I will have no difficulty attracting financial support for my candidacy from people throughout Connecticut because because this is Connecticut's best opportunity to have a Republican member of Congress, and I am the candidate best suited to capitalize on that opportunity.
In 2010, Linda McMahon won this district. In 2010, Tom Foley won in this district. Both of them were business people. Both of them put some of their money, some of their skin in the game. I've raised $600,000 from individuals just like you. And I've also committed about an equal amount of money towards my campaign. It's going to cost probably another $2 million to win this race in November. And you know, it'd be wonderful to say that we had enough Republican bodies in this state to make up for all of the unions and all of the organizations that support the Democratic machine. But we don't. And that is a sad fact. When I got in this race, I met with Sam Calgary and I asked him, what would you do differently? He said, I raised more money because after I won the primary, I had $80,000 left to go against the Democratic machine. It wasn't enough.
Andrew and I sometimes we agree on things like protection. So in this case, yes, it's very difficult for self-funders to win elections in Connecticut. It rarely ever happens. In fact, in Connecticut, we have never elected a congressman, a senator, or a governor who actually were self-funders. I'm very proud of our fundraising operation, not because we've raised the most. We've raised something like $700,000, $800,000, which is the most gross, but because of the number of donors that we have. Our average donation is under $100. We have about 7,000 donors, and they're small donors for the most part. One of the donations that I really cherish, and it's my favorite donation I ever got, was a $5 check from a lady who enclosed a note that said, Mr. Bernier, my husband's been laid off, my hours have been drastically reduced at my job. I don't have a lot to give, but I feel like I have to give something because I believe that this country is in terrible danger. Those are the people we need to appeal to. People don't just vote with the ballot and their feet, they also vote with their wallet. I think it says a lot about a candidate who's able to attract donations from many people as opposed to someone who doesn't have many donors or none at all.
Actually, I'm not a self-funder. We did raise money at the beginning, something like $270,000 or $300,000. Toward the end of the campaign for the last 5 or 6 months, frankly, I got embarrassed talking to people and asking for $5, $10, $15, or $20 when they can't afford gas for the cars and food for the tables. So I discontinued fundraising completely. Should I be the nominee, I will fundraise again, and I will supplement that with up to $2 million because Lisa Foley is correct. This race will take approximately $2 million to win over the Democrats. Now, the way I also look upon this money investment and having skin in the game is that I really owe this to the next generation because the money itself is going to become almost worthless if we don't fix the problem in Washington. So I'm committed. And yes, we have the fundraising capabilities that we will start after the primary.
This is Selectman Pat Lodra, and the first question will be directed to Lisa.
In 2011, 21% of the federal budget was accounted for by Medicare and Medicaid, a full $769 billion. These entitlement programs are the largest contributors to our nation's growing deficit, which becomes then a burden of future generations. In fact, In the last 4 budget deficits, each surpassing $1 trillion, have consumed a larger portion of the economy than at any time since World War II. If elected, what would you do to rein in the cost of the entitlement programs and minimize, as much as possible, the impact these programs have on our economy and on our federal budget?
Thank you, Pat. Yes, we sit here and we know the train has left the tracks and it's about to hit the wall. And you know, the Republican Party, what I love about us, is we do care about money. We want to make sure that we're spending it wisely. We want to make sure that we do something about this massive debt that we're putting on the next generation. That's why the people up here on this stage are part of the Republican Party and proud of it. Medicare and Medicaid, I want to make sure that our safety net is there for our seniors that are in those programs now. Because I'll tell you what, I speak with them all the time, and the Democrats are in there telling them lies, fabricating all these fears that they are now worried that they will not be able to have the Medicare and Medicaid that they need. So we as Republicans have to do a much better job marketing our plan, making sure that they know they will not be affected. However, we are living much longer than ever was anticipated. I met a woman just the other day, 106, still chipper. You know, we have to do something. And we probably will need to do a means or age testing, means testing. We are living longer, we're living healthier. People are gonna have to work longer. And you know what? We can. And we may not work the same job that we had most of our career, but I meet people all the time, 68, 69, 70, and they want to keep working. They feel good about working. We've got to make sure that we're not sticking them with Social Security and payroll taxes when they choose to work at that age. But those are the things that we're going to have to do for the 50 and under, the 55 and under. You know, the devil's in the details, we'll have to figure them out, but those will have to be on the table to save our programs.
You know, I was disappointed when the president put together a national commission to deal with some of these problems, got the answers, or at least a starting point for debate on how we can solve entitlement problems, and then took that report, put it on a shelf, and never took a look at it, never addressed it in public. Any solution we get to Medicare, I believe, has got to be bipartisan. This is a huge program. It's a program that millions upon millions of Americans depend on. Obviously, getting rid of Obamacare and eliminating that $500 billion that's going to be ripped off is important. But, you know, just as important is getting down the cost of health care, because we can change the financing of Medicare till the cows come home, but if we don't actually reduce what it costs to provide health care, we'll never be able to meet our requirements. There's a lot of things we can do to do that. We can do tort reform. We can allow the sale of insurance across state lines. We can force the AMA to actually give us more doctors than we had in 1980. Right now we're stuck at 1980 levels. There's other supply things we can do to increase the amount of access to medical care. So there's a lot of things that I think the government can do, but really the best thing it can do is help market forces solve this problem by getting out of the way.
Yeah, when we talk about entitlement programs, I'd like to say that with regard to Social Security, the people who have paid into the system years and years and years, who have depended upon it or will depend upon it, are entitled to that money. And as a matter of fact, they're going to get a very small return on that money for the people who are going to be retiring shortly. Medicare and Medicaid are so out of control, and they have been out of control for years and years and years. So what do? We have a dysfunctional Congress that gets together 2 summers ago in 2001, and they raise the debt ceiling at the expense and sequester for Medicare and military, and they get nowhere. So what they do is they then hand it over to the dysfunctional 12, who then get nowhere. So we always get ourselves into a position where we're at the deadline, and we get nowhere, we kick it down the road again. Do we have to raise the retirement age? Absolutely we do. We have to be honest about it. That was created when people lived for less lives. So we have to be honest about it, we have to have guts, we have to know that we might lose a vote or two by doing the right thing for this country, because if we don't, our children and grandchildren will be in shackles forever.
I very much agree with Lisa that Democrats have been fear-mongering this issue in an entirely irresponsible way. And no one is more guilty of that than our current Congressperson, Chris Murphy. And I wonder if Lisa anticipated that when she gave him more than $5,000 to defeat Nancy Johnson. Because I think it was foreseeable. Those of us who saw Chris Murphy in the state legislature knew very well that if he defeated Nancy Johnson, this district would be represented by someone who would subscribe to fear-mongering as a way to solve problems. I agree with Justin. This problem is too big to be bogged down by pure partisanship. I'm a Republican, make no mistake about it. I've been a Republican since I turned 18. But I'm an American before I'm a Republican. And as Americans, we have a responsibility to put the common good ahead of pure partisan advantage. And if we're committed to doing that, there's no problem we can't solve, because we remain the greatest nation on the planet. And all of us know our seniors deserve the peace of mind to know that the Medicare system will be there to serve them as they were promised.
In the essence of time, I'm going to rule as the moderator, and I'm going to give Andy the last question to go through. And I would like you, each individual from Andrew on over, answer your question as we have, because I don't think we can go through the full panelists in the essence of time. I don't think we're going to make it. So, is that okay with the panelists? Andrew, are you comfortable with that? The last question.
Great, thanks, Pat. Small business owners and entrepreneurs naturally learn from their own lessons as well as that which they observe from others, oftentimes experiencing, unfortunately, multiple mistakes, multiple failures, but fortunately, oftentimes success as well. So drawing from either your own experience and or that which you've gleaned from others, what is the most important lesson or piece of advice from the business world that you may have learned that you would bring with you to Congress?
That would be directed to you, Andrew.
Well, as I said, I've been working in my family's small business for 25 years. And the most important lesson that I've learned from my business is if you treat people the way you wish to be treated, you will be able to build the relationships of trust which enable a business to prosper. And I believe in the political arena, the same holds true. Nothing is more important than earning a reputation for trustworthiness and integrity. When people can rely on your handshake, that's what makes for a sound business environment. So the lessons that I'll take from my experience as a small business person, building trust with my customers and clients, is the same lesson that I've learned in political life. Be true to your word, be responsive, accessible. The customer deserves nothing less, and that's what they will get if I have the opportunity to serve them as their member of Congress.
No, Justin, you're next. We're just going to run right through the essence of time.
What I've learned from my experience in government, the military, and the private sector is that any organization can be made more efficient if it's forced to do that. And I believe that right now, we're facing a $17 trillion deficit and a $1.7 trillion annual budget deficit. We're going to have to make tough decisions. Now, I've talked a lot about economic growth, and I think we can grow our way out of a lot of this, but we're also going to have to make cuts. And I believe that no area of government, or very few areas of government, ought to be sacred cows in this process. I think there's places where we can find efficiencies everywhere. You know, we've got a government accountability office in Washington, D.C., whose job it is to find duplicity of effort, to find wasteful government, find places where we can actually save a lot of money for the American taxpayers. And just like the National Commission that Obama put in place, those reports that the GAO come up with, they just sit on shelves, and they're never enacted. And so I think the next Congress When it comes in and it realizes that it has to deal with the spending problem that we have, we've got to make real spending reduction to get to a balanced budget. I think it's very important that we open up those reports, we find out where the duplication of effort is, we find out where the wasteful spending is, and we actually cut there before we even get into a conversation with the Democrats about taxes. We should not be raising taxes, we should be cutting government and growing the economy.
Let me just start out by saying that I started my first business when I was 29. I've created 15 different entities since that day. Some have been outrageously successful. Some have been outright failures. So I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But you know, the biggest lesson was when, in 08, our economy tanked. Housing prices dropped, stock market dropped, customers stopped coming out. And my businesses had to tighten their belt. We had to say no, and I had to say, hell no. And sometimes I'd say, not now. But in doing that, my companies became more efficient. They became more flexible. I got rid of the dead weight and the dead wood. I was able to actually survive, and now I can thrive. And I believe that lesson can be taken to our federal government. We are going to have to weed out the waste. We're going to have to slim down and become more flexible, become better listeners. And that's how we will survive, and that's how we will overcome this terrible economy that is really stifling job creation.
This great system that we call the free enterprise system gives us the freedom to succeed and win, gives us the freedom to lose and go bankrupt. That's part of the system. But what I've learned in business is that you never give up. You always have a goal that you move to. You may need to compromise in something to move ahead. You don't need to throw away a pass in the end zone to win, but to get ahead in business. Small rushes of 3 or 4 yards sometimes works as long as we move the goal forward. But in business, and especially in business in Connecticut, you have to be doggedly determined because there are barriers all the time. There are obstacles all the time. So you have to have a thick skin, and you have to deal with each issue as it comes up, and if you do, you'll succeed. Anybody who says that they've succeeded in everything that they've done is lying, because you must learn the hard way, you must learn sometimes by failure how to succeed.
Program, we are going to ask one candidate to ask another candidate one question. And another candidate will ask another candidate another question. It's just one-on-one, and I understand, if I'm not mistaken, they have a 2-minute response. So what I can do is take it from Mark. You may ask one of the other panelists and one of the other candidates a question, and they have 2 minutes to respond, whatever question you choose.
This is a question for Andrew. We were at a Republican debate in Torrington. I'd like you to answer how you can, as a candidate, tell us that if elected you would accept an increase in taxes, which I believe that you said that you would. My belief is that this country has a spending problem, and more taxes is not the answer. So my question is, why do you support a tax increase?
Mark, let me first say that I have said on the record, I'm not signing Grover Norquist's pledge, because I would rather make you mad because I'm not signing Grover Norquist's pledge than make you mad because I broke my word. Now, if you listen carefully to the debate in Toronto, what I said is I believe there are corporate tax loopholes that could be closed and which would result in potentially more revenue for this country. I think there's one thing about which we all agree, and all of us have been consistent in our campaigns, that the spending in this nation is out of control. And it's that spending which is bringing us to the abyss. And so, in my opinion, the first and only order of business is to cut spending. I've learned the lesson the hard way in Hartford, because this administration, Chris Donovan and Dan Malloy, have not cut spending a nickel. Instead, they brought us the biggest tax increase ever. I've learned from that, and I don't want to see it repeated in Washington, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen.
Andrew, I'm going to ask you that same question again, because my memory was that you said you would increase taxes by $1 if we cut taxes by if we cut spending by $10. Would you stand by, with that raising taxes, would you stand by that?
Again, we can all go look at the tape, but I think what was said was that if President Obama was reelected and the Democrats came with $10 in real spending reductions, I would entertain finding revenue equaling $1 by doing things like closing corporate tax loopholes. Listen, this country has been paralyzed by an inability of our congresspeople to search for any kind of common ground. The paralysis we're experiencing now does nothing for anyone. It is bringing our nation to its knees. And so, I am a Republican. I've always been a Republican, Lisa. I haven't given to Chris Murphy. I'm not someone who supports people who are intent on raising our taxes. But if I go to Washington, D.C., I won't support a single tax increase because I won't let me tell you this. Spending reductions are the first order of business. The way we're going to grow revenues is not by raising taxes, but by creating more jobs and more prosperity, where more revenue will be the result.
Andrew, you gotta be the smartest guy in the room because people keep asking you questions. Question. We've talked a lot about the economy, and we did talk about some of the social issues. And there's a bill in the House of Representatives recently that was about gender selection abortions, where people in the House, members of the House, wanted to outlaw the process whereby someone goes to get an abortion because they don't like the gender of the baby. Because say it's a female and they want a male, and so they go to get an abortion. We're seeing more and more of this in the United States, and for the life of me, I can't believe why anyone would want to do that. I've got two beautiful little girls that I'm just completely in love with, and I can't imagine why anyone would do that. But I'd like to know what your position would be, and I think a lot of people in the district would like to know how you would have voted on that bill dealing with gender selection abortions. Would you have voted to outlaw gender selection abortions, or would you have voted to keep them legal?
Justin, I believe that Roe versus Wade is the law of the land. And that until a fetus reaches the point of viability, it is the right of a woman in this country, in consultation with her doctor, to make the very painful choice to have an abortion. To me, nothing could be more despicable than for that choice to be made on the basis of gender. And I can't imagine, you say it's a commonplace. I would be hard-pressed to believe that it's commonplace. I have never heard of it occurring in this state, and I sure hope it never does, because nothing would make me more angry than it should ever be.
Would you, hold on, ask your question. Would you vote?
Speak to the audience, please.
The answer is, I would not vote for any bill that violates the constitutional rights as enumerated by the United States Supreme Court. To the extent that bill would do that, I would not be able to support it.
You don't have my vote.
You have a question to ask.
I do, Pat. I have a record. I'm the only candidate here that's been elected to anything, and I'm flattered to have the attention of all of my opponents. But I think the question that hasn't been asked and needs to be asked is a question that I want to ask of Lisa. Because in February of this year, I was pummeled on WTIC, left and right, by former Governor John Rowland. At the same time, he was being paid $5,000 a month by Lisa Wilson Foley's husband. And that fact was not disclosed by John Rowland, it wasn't disclosed by Brian Foley, and it wasn't disclosed, most importantly, by the candidate, Lisa Wilson Foley. And so the question I have for Ms. Lisa Wilson Foley is, when she knew that John Rowland was being paid $5,000 a month by her husband, when she knew he was berating me repeatedly and vociferously on the radio, did it ever cross her mind that that might give rise to a federal grand jury calling into question the legality of this conduct?
Let's be clear. This was a political ploy by an opponent who was an ex-FBI agent. He made allegations without any evidence. The whole issue relates to, did John Rowland do work for Apple Rehab? My campaign, myself, none of my companies have been contacted by any federal authorities. The pure question is, did John Rowland work for the money that he was paid? And after hundreds of pieces of paper and documentation of meetings and telephone calls and emails that have all been turned over to the federal authorities, we sit here waiting, and I feel very confident that the truth will prevail. Thank you.
Last part of the program, each candidate has the ability to have a summary, and it will be 2.5 minutes, and I will start at the beginning. We started with Lisa, and Mark finished last, so we'll have Mark give a summary in 2.5 minutes.
Again, thank you all for coming. I don't know if I'm finishing up my opening statement or starting on my closing statement, but anyway, I won't be too long and too long-winded. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This is a great, great debate. I'd like to thank my opponents. This has been a tremendous season of campaigning, and I give you all credit because I know what you're going through. I'm going through it, and I feel it every single day. So thank you for a great debate. You've been great competitors, really. This is an incredible election in that never in my memory have I recalled an election so important. We have, as I said before, the greatest country under God and in this world, and it hasn't been equaled. It hasn't been equaled in 200 years. We have to make sure we stay the strongest. We have to make sure that we have freedom and liberty guaranteed to us by our founding fathers 200 years ago. We have to make sure of that. This is a critical, critical vote. Critical vote. This is a vote for freedom. This is a vote for a clear conservative choice. The most important election is coming up on the 14th. I ask for your vote. I ask for your vote. For your vote for me, and I will work to keep that freedom for you. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't forget, Mark, we have one more debate, I think, on the radio. I don't want to leave you with the impression we're never going to see each other again. We will. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out tonight, again, to the Newtown RTC, and to everyone who participated, our folks on the board here. We've had a great, spirited campaign so far. We got another 10 days left or so. The real question out there, I think, is what kind of person are we going to send to Congress? What kind of values and principles do we want them to stand for? We are headed, I think, into very tumultuous waters. I think that it's a treacherous situation out there. And over the next 2 years, we're going to be making some very difficult decisions that I believe will set the course for this country for decades to come. There are going to be very difficult moments, and we're going to have to make tough decisions. And in those moments, I believe we need leaders who are going to stand by those conservative principles, even if it hurts, even if it seems uncertain at the time, because those are the only principles, I believe, that can get America back to where it needs to be, where we want it all to be, where there's prosperity, where there's security, and where the America that I grew up in, where you have a booming economy, where people feel good about themselves, and where they're not scared about their economic future, where we can come back to that. But that, I believe, is only going to happen if we nominate and elect candidates who are going to stand by those conservative principles. I'm one of those conservatives. You have choices in this election. I believe those choices will also determine what kind of party we are as Republicans moving forward. Are we a conservative party in the state, or are we a liberal party? Are we going to show daylight between us and the Democrats? Or are we going to minimize those differences to the point where we have a one-party system. So I'm asking for your support today. I hope you will spread the word about the election. Whether or not you're supporting, we want you to participate in it. God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you, first of all, to members of the audience who have made it your business to become more informed about each of us. Thanks to the panelists for asking fair and tough questions, and thanks to my competitors for engaging in this spirited process. I chose to run for Congress because I did not want Chris Donovan to be my congressman. And I looked in October and said, what will it take for Chris Donovan not to be my congressman? And the answer that I arrived at was the best way to prevent Chris Donovan from being my congressman is to run myself, because I've served side by side with him, and I know what he's done to the state of Connecticut. I've seen it with my own eyes. Never will I apologize for giving 18 years of my life to public service. I have a passion for public service. It's important work. And never has the decision of the voters been more critical than it is right now to choose a nominee who has the capacity to get to the finish line in November. And with all due respect, with a federal investigation hanging over Chris Donovan, this party will be ill-served to nominate Lisa Wilson-Foley, who has the same cloud of a federal grand jury hanging over her head. She hopes that at the end of the day, she's exonerated. But until that grand jury finishes its work, none of us know what the outcome will be. And my friend, Mark Greenberg, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of jabs tonight because I'm the only candidate here with a record. I've never missed a vote in 18 years. But when Mark was asked on the radio, what's your solution to the healthcare crisis facing this country, the answer that he freely gave was, I have no idea. If the Republican Party wants to run a candidate who, when asked a question about the most pressing public policy issue of the day, says that he can offer no solutions, I think we are going to gamble away a golden opportunity to have a Republican member of Congress. And as I've said to my friend Justin, the outright falsehoods that he has been willing to throw out into the public domain without remorse make him unfit to be a member of Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, if you choose me to be your member of Congress, you'll have a congressman who is trustworthy, reliable, hardworking, responsive, accessible, and there for you. I've made the most of my office in the state Senate, not for my benefit, but for the benefit of the people I serve. I want to use the office of Congress in the 5th District for the benefit of all of you here and everyone in the 5th District. Thank you very much.
Well, it's great to see you here on a hot summer night, and I appreciate your time and the audience and our panel and my competitors. It's been my pleasure to be here with you. You know, besides raising my family, running for this office is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. It is so important that we elect people with real-world experience, not career politicians. People with strong principles and common sense. People that will stand up and have the courage to make the tough decisions and bring leadership to help turn our country around. My career has been spent building businesses and putting people to work. And I've done it without federal stimulus, bailouts, or handouts, or giveaways. And no matter what President Obama says, government did not build my businesses. I did. And I did it with hard work and perseverance and personal financial risk. That's what our country is all about. As a community leader, as a business leader, and as co-chair of my household, I do have the ability and background to bring a new vision and a new voice to Washington. Yes, our country has a lot of problems. An outrageous debt, an overspending Congress, problems that are going to take a lot of fixing. But I believe it's not too late. That if in November we go to the polls and we vote for new leadership, we can take back this seat and we can end Democrat rule in Connecticut. I am so happy to be here with you tonight. I am blessed to have a strong, supportive family behind me in this candidacy. And I'm humbled to be asking you for your vote August 14th, because I would love to be your Congresswoman and represent you in Washington. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to take this point in time to recognize our panelists, to thank them for coming over here and doing a great job.